Hey there hunters, in this video I want to share a really good Lucent Hive Moth Overshield support based build with you guys. This build will be generating an absurd amount of Void Overshields for not just yourself but also for any nearby allies, and it will also generate armor charges for them too as well, and it blinds everything too. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so firstly on your subclass, we're going to be on the Arc subclass. And I'm going to be using the Gathering Storm Super because it is great for DPS. However, this is not a necessity. If you want to use a roaming super like the Arc Staff, for example, feel free to do that. Whatever super that you choose, it doesn't matter. For your dodge, you're going to need Gambler's Dodge. This will recharge your entire melee blade when used near combatants. For your melee, you will need Combination Blow. This will grant your melee a stacking melee damage bonus after getting a final blow with your melee after dodging. So if you dodge and get a melee kill, that will give you 1 stack of Combination Blow. And it stacks up to 3 times. Now the more stacks that you have a Combination Blow before using your next arc melee, that is the more damage that your next arc melee will dish out. And your arc melees also restore a small amount of HP to you on final blow. For your grenade, you will need the flashbang grenade. However, do not pay attention to the description of this arc grenade because that is irrelevant for the purpose of this build. All you need to know is that the flashbang grenade currently has the shortest cooldown out of all the arc grenades in the game, as you can see here. Now this is of great importance for this build because, as you will see later on in this video, for the exotic armor piece of choice for this video, this grenade will allow us to use our grenades more frequently than the other grenades, which will be very beneficial to this build. For the 2 aspects, the first one you're going to need is Flow State. This will make you amplify when defeating any jolted targets. Now when amplified, your dodge recharge will be increased, you'll be more resilient when dodging, and your reload speed will also be greatly increased. For your second aspect, you will need Lethal Current. This will create a damaging arc aftershock for your next melee after dodging, and it will also increase the melee lunge range of your next melee after dodging too, so you can hit targets from a larger distance, which is nice, and it will also jolt the target that you hit with it. Now damaging any jolted target with a melee will also blind them. For your fragments, the first fragment you will need is Spark of Beacons. This will create a blinding explosion when you get rapid arc special weapon final blows when amplified. The second fragment you will need is Spark of Discharge. This will generate ionic traces when you get arc weapon final blows. For the third fragment you will need Spark of Amplitude. This will simply generate orbs of power when you get rapid kills while you're amplified. And lastly, you will need the Spark of Shock fragment. This will enable your arc grenades to jolt targets. Now just like the flashbang grenade, this will prove its worth later on in this build once we get to the exotic armor piece of choice. An exotic armor piece of choice for this build are the exotic gauntlets, the Mothkeeper's wraps. The exotic perk on this exotic is Winged Eclipse. Your grenade becomes a cage of loyal moths that release on impact and fly toward the nearest target or ally. If they reach a target, they detonate in a blinding explosion. But if they reach an ally or yourself, the moths will grant your ally a Void Overshield. Now what this essentially means is that your grenades are now Lucent Hive Moth grenades, and you are also granted 2 charges. This is why I said you're going to want the flashbang grenade, as it currently has the shortest cooldown out of all the arc grenades in the game. Now this means that we'll be able to use our Lucent Hive Moths more frequently. And as for the Spark of Shock fragment, this is of importance because, believe it or not, this actually works with the Lucent Moths that are created from your Lucent Hive Moth grenade. So if you throw your Lucent Hive Moth grenade into a group of enemies, for example, and it seeks out and blinds targets, it's also going to jolt those targets too, which is amazing. Now back to the exotic armor, the mods that you will need. First one you will need is Firepower. This will generate orbs of power when you get grenade final blows. This is great because this works with the Lucent Moths too. So if you get a final blow for your Lucent Moths, it will create orbs of power, which is nice. And the second mod you will need is Impact Induction. This will reduce your grenade cooldown when causing damage with your melee, and you're going to need 2 of these. Now as for the exotic weapon of choice for this build video, we're going to be using the Diris exotic grenade launcher. The exotic trait on this weapon is Loyal Moths. Final blows with this weapon create a loyal moth. The moth will seek out nearby targets and detonate, damaging and blinding them. Now what's great about the Diris paired with the Mothkeeper's wraps is that when you get a final blow with this grenade launcher, it will create both an offensive and a defensive Lucent Moth. So this means that when you get a kill, it will create a moth that will give you or your allies an overshield, but it will also create a moth that will seek out and blind nearby targets. And the intrinsic trait on this exotic is Corrupted Nucleosynthesis. This weapon enrages when dealing or taking sustained damage, getting increased rate of fire when enraged. So as you're dealing or taking damage, it will increase the rate of fire of the weapon when enraged. And if you have the Callus, which I highly recommend you get because it's a good Callus, it will make the weapon enrage faster when amplified, and final blows with this grenade launcher will also make you amplified. Now for your kinetic weapon, I highly recommend you use the Perpetualis because the Perpetualis is the best in slot kinetic weapon for this build, in my opinion, because it has enhanced demolitionist, which will grant me an increased amount of grenade energy on final blow, and it also has enhanced envious assassin, which will overflow the magazine based on number of kills I get with my other weapons before swapping to this weapon. And because we're going to be using the Diris 95% of the time, this weapon is always going to be overflowed to the max, and you're going to have over like 100 rounds in the mag, which is absolutely insane. And the origin trait on this weapon is also good for this build too, because the origin trait is Noble Deeds. This weapon gains charges after assisting allies with revives, healing, overshields, or subclass buffs. Defeating targets consumes these charges, and while charged, the weapon gains bonus handling and reload speed or charge rate for swords. Now, for the purpose of this build, we're going to be generating a lot of overshields for ourselves and our allies. So we're always going to have multiple stacks of Noble Deeds. And when we have charges, the weapon will be granted bonus handling and reload speed, which is great. Now, as far as your heavy weapon, I also recommend that you have demo on it. Something like the hothead would be a great option, because what you can actually do is you can actually unload your rocket, and then you can instantly throw your grenade, which will refill your magazine, and then you can fire another rocket, resulting in pretty good DPS. Now back to the armor. For your helmet, the first mod you will need is Arc Siphon. This will create orbs of power when you get rapid arc weapon final blows. Now this works with the Diris too. So when you get a kill with your Diris and it creates Lucent Moths that seeks out targets, if those Moths get kills, this will also generate orbs of power. And we're going to be pairing this with Powerful Friends, so when we collect orbs of power, it will also cause nearby allies to increase their current armor charge. Now this is great because with the Spark of Amplitude Fragment that I showed you earlier, we're going to be generating an absurd amount of orbs of power. So our allies are always going to have maximum armor charges, which is very supportive. And the last mod you will need is Special Ammo Finder to increase the drop chance of special ammo on kill. Now for your chest, the first mod you will need is Arc Reserves. This will simply increase the amount of ammo that you can carry for your Diris exotic grenade launcher. And you're also going to need Charged Up to increase the amount of maximum armor stack charges that you can carry. Now for your boots, first mod you will want is Enervation. This will reduce your grenade cooldown each time that you pick up orbs of power. And like I said earlier, we're going to be generating a lot of orbs, so we're always going to have full grenade charge. You're also going to need Arc Weapon Surge to give your Diris a damage bonus while you have Arc armor charges, and Arc Scavenger so that when you pick up ammo for your Diris, it will receive bonus reserves. Lastly, for your cloak, the first mod you will need is Powerful Attraction. This will magnetize any nearby orbs of power upon using your class ability, so you don't have to pick them up yourself. You will also need Special Finisher to generate special ammo for you and your allies when you perform a finisher while you have at least 3 stacks of armor charge. And lastly, Time Dilation to increase the duration of your decaying armor charges. Alright guys, so that's it for the build explanation. Now I'm going to show you the unique interaction between the Mothkeeper's Wraps and the Diris exotic grenade launcher, as well as explain to you guys how to use it. And yeah, let's get to it. The first thing that you will notice in game when you're using this build is that if you take a look at your grenade ability, you will notice that it has 2 charges now, and it has a Lucent Hive Moth icon on it. This is due to the Mothkeeper's Wraps overriding our base grenade and turning it into Lucent Hive Moth grenade. Now if you throw this grenade at yourself or an ally, it will spawn a Void Moth that will give you or your ally a Void Overshield, which will grant you or your allies a 50% damage reduction buff. But if you throw it at enemies, for example, it will spawn a blue mob that will seek out blind targets. And because we're using the Spark of Shock Fragment, it will also jolt the targets that you hit with it. Now the unique interaction between the Diris and the Mothkeeper's Wraps is that usually the Diris will only spawn an offensive Lucent Hive Moth that will seek out and blind targets, but because we're using the Mothkeeper's Wraps with the Diris, it will actually spawn 2 Moths. It will spawn 1 Overshield Moth and 1 Blinding Moth, as you can see here. That is the unique interaction between the Lucent Hive Moth Grenade Launcher, the Diris, and the Mothkeeper's Wraps exotic gauntlets. Now I'm going to show you guys some gameplay of this build. I hope you guys enjoyed, and until next time. Right before we get into the gameplay for this build, there are a few artifact perks that I want to recommend to you guys that can really take this build to the next level. The first perk I want to recommend is Divider's Discount. This will significantly reduce the cost of all scavenger mods, making them more cost efficient. The second perk I'm recommending is Elemental Orbs Arc. This will grant you a chance to create Arc Elemental Orbs, where you get Arc Weapon Final Blows when on the Arc subclass, which we will be, and these Arc Orbs can be picked up and thrown to create Arc Explosions that will jolt targets that hit damage. The third perk I'm recommending is Communal Pickups. This will grant your Arc Weapons a period of increased damage for about 10 seconds when any allies pick up or throw your Elemental Orbs. The fourth perk that I'm recommending is Refreshing Pickups. This will reduce the cooldown of your least powered ability when you pick up Elemental Orbs. The fifth perk that I'm recommending is Elemental Embrace. This will grant you significant damage reduction when you have any subclass elemental buffs. Now, because we're going to be on Arc, this is referring to being amplified. So when you're amplified, you're going to receive a lot less damage, which is pretty nice. The sixth perk that I'm recommending is Monochromatic Maestro. This will grant you a period of increased damage by 10% for 5 seconds when you cause damage with your elemental abilities or your elemental weapons. So if you cause damage with your grenade, for example, that will grant your arc weapons a period of increased damage by 10% for 5 seconds. But if you cause damage with your arc weapons, that will grant your arc abilities a period of increased damage by 10% for 5 seconds. And lastly, I'm recommending the artifact perk Elemental Munitions. This will grant you the chance to create special or heavy ammo when you get final blows with your elemental orbs. With those artifact perk mods that I just mentioned to you guys, you can really enhance the effectiveness of this build. Now enjoy the gameplay, like this build video for more content similar to this, and subscribe if you haven't already.